Most people think that mental strength is something that you're either born with or you're not. And if you struggle, that's something you have to just accept. That used to be me. In university, my dream job was to land at a top-tier consulting firm, Bain Company. I wanted it more than anything, and I kept failing. I thought my mental strength was keeping me from performing at my best and landing the job. I kept hearing a crushing voice in my head. You're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. And somehow, the harder I tried, more prep, more grinding, more networking, the worse it got. I thought I was just not built for it. That some people just had the mental strength and toughness, and I didn't. It turns out that story is completely wrong. But here's the part that nobody tells you. Everything I was doing to fix my mental strength, the grinding, the forcing, the extra discipline, was probably making it worse. Stay with me, because once I understood what was actually happening in my brain, everything changed for me, and not just in my career. If you've ever felt like your brain was working against you, I put together the exact reprogramming process that I'm going to cover in this video in a step-by-step guide called the No Choice Plan. It's linked in the description below and it's completely free. But watch this first. Here's what most people do when they want to build mental strength, including myself back in the day. They try harder, more force, more discipline, more pressure. And here's exactly why it feels so exhausting. You're trying to override a system that you don't understand. That's not strength, that's friction. What I want to introduce you to is something I call the Mind OS. It's the idea that your brain operates like software. It has goals it's programmed to achieve, rules it runs on, and it executes those goals brilliantly, even when those goals aren't ones that you choose consciously. The anxiety when you feel you're about to do something big and the overthinking that kicks in right in the moment of action, that's not weakness. That's your Mind OS programmed to do exactly what it's meant to: protect an old goal. The good news is this software can be reprogrammed. But before I tell you how, you need to understand how it got written in the first place, because this is where almost everyone misses it. Here's the thing about your Mind OS. You didn't consciously write it. A series of actions did. I remember sitting in one of these networking events at the time I was applying for consulting roles. I remember there was a guy next to me talking to one of the partners, and he sounded so smart, structured, sharp. And I sat there listening, and I felt myself sort of deflate. Every comparison I made just told me the same thing over and over again. He belonged here, and maybe I just don't. I walked into that application process with a verdict already written. The rule that my Mind OS was constantly running: don't get your hopes up. You'll embarrass yourself. And I did, not because I wasn't prepared, but because my brain was faithfully executing a program tuned to an older goal. It was protecting me from the humiliation it decided was coming. And here's what's actually crazy. The more you push in those moments, the harder the system fights back. You're fighting a highly effective system that genuinely believes it's keeping you safe. But here's what changes everything. Once you understand this, you stop beating yourself up and you start to ask a completely different question. How do I update the code? To answer that, you need to first understand something known as the reticular activation system, or the RAS. Think of it as a gatekeeper for your awareness. Out of the millions of pieces of information that are processed by your brain, your RAS decides what you actually notice. And here's what it filters on. It filters on where your Mind OS is pointing to. You've seen the RAS work in action. The classic example: you think about white cars and suddenly you start seeing white cars everywhere. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. If your system is tuned to stay safe and avoid risks, or you're constantly thinking about threats and dangers and things that could make you feel terrible, your brain is actively filtering for those things. And so it means it's actively filtering out opportunities that you actually need to progress on your goal. You're walking past open doors you do not see, conversations you're not having, ideas that you're not noticing, because your filter isn't pointed to receive them. Sit with that for a second. Everything you want might be within reach, but your own brain is hiding that from you. Now here's the flip side, and here's where my story gets really interesting. Fast forward a few years after those failed consulting applications. I was moving from the US to India to marry my college love. Again, job hunting in a new country. I had started doing some work on my Mind OS, and I was relaxed and open. I was scrolling through some random obscure job site where I saw a job titled Strategy Consulting at a top-tier firm, or something along those lines. It was a vague listing with no company name listed. Everything about it screamed, ignore this. It made no logical sense to apply. But something made me click. I guess I was just curious and I applied. It was Bain Company, and it turned out to be the first time in its history that they had ever hired anyone outside of their traditional recruiting pipeline in India. That's how I got in. My RAS actually picked up on this random opening that I would have most certainly walked past. And that's exactly what the no choice plan does. It removes thinking from the equation entirely so that your RAS can be tuned to receive opportunities and openings that are geared towards your goal. Grab the guide in the description below. It's completely free. So back to this. How do you actually reprogram your OS? Here's the most important thing to keep in mind. You cannot think your way to a new operating system. Repeated action writes the new code. I call this the no choice plan. I want to show you exactly how this looks like using another example in my life. After my second child, 2 C-sections later, I made a decision. I wanted to get strong, lean, and fit. I wanted to lift my kids without pain, to feel like myself again. But every single morning, I used to wake up with this crazy body pain. And every time I would try to take action towards my fitness goals, I would get a huge rush of inner negotiation. Too tired, too much pain, the kids need me, maybe I'm just not cut out for it. So I stopped negotiating and I applied the no choice plan. The night before, I decided to take action. I packed my bag, I laid my shoes out, my socks out. I thought about every single excuse that my mind could come up with, and I tackled it the night before. I even got myself a trainer so that I could actually show up. I was removing the decision entirely from the 8 a.m. Sachi who has tremendous body pain. She couldn't be trusted with it. So I made the decision the night before, and the morning Sachi had to just execute. But here's what changed everything. After every single session that I showed up for, I journaled. And I wrote about how I felt after. And it was a complete 180 every single time. Minimal body pain. I felt stronger than ever. I felt calm. I trusted my body again. Over weeks, that journal became evidence to reprogram the mind OS. Slowly, the negotiations got shorter. They almost vanished. And this whole system gave my nervous system whole new data to reprogram itself. That is neuroplasticity. Your brain physically rewires itself based on repeated actions. So you're laying down new neural pathways every time you show up, and you note the emotional state after. 2 years later, I'm stronger than ever, lifting at my heaviest weights ever in my life. And I genuinely can't wait to make it to the gym every single day. That is not willpower, that is a reprogrammed system. I lay this exact system out step by step in the no choice plan linked in the description below. Removing choice or thinking from the moment of action is the secret to reprogramming your brain for the mental strength you need to achieve your biggest goals. That is the secret. You were never weak. You just didn't have the manual, like most of us. The anxiety, the overthinking, the doubt. Once we understand that these are all symptoms of the old code, we no longer have to believe them as true. We just have to believe in the system, and it works. The repeated, consistent action that you actually can take now by removing thinking from the equation and by journaling after every single action, you are replacing those feelings of anxiety, overthinking with new tools, with feelings of self-trust and positivity and momentum. Grab the no choice plan in the description and apply it to any one goal that you're stuck on, that you feel you need mental strength for. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you want to go deeper on how all of this works, I explore a lot more in the Inner Lab. This is my free weekly newsletter where I break down how the Mind OS actually works and what it actually takes to pursue your biggest goals with peace and joy versus hustle and anxiety. If that tickles your curiosity, you're in for a ride. Thank you and see you next time.